So I want you to make him welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Max Armstrong.
Let's see if I can get this right. Hold this one close and this one not so close,
That's
right?
That's right.
Appreciate it so much, young man. I tell
you.
you what, it's always a privilege to be with you, cousin. I come down here every time and I feel like I get my passport stamped and I'm like one of the family when I come down here with you. And
You are.
I just appreciate the warm welcome.
Did you get enough barbecue today?
I never could get enough of that stuff. I'm telling you, wasn't that a great meal today? Wasn't that fantastic? Oh, man. That was so moist.
Let me ask you this. Growing up on a farm in Indiana, have you ever had as good a barbecue as you had today?
Oh, no. I'll be honest with you. I have not. You know, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be dry, it's going to be a little woody, and it doesn't have the flavor. That was not the case today. You didn't even want to put any sauce on this today.
No, sir. As a matter of fact, one of the reps from AGCO, I think Miss Claudia, she said, I usually have to have barbecue sauce on everything, but I'll never eat it again with this barbecue.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't it a remarkable time that we're in right now in the ag industry? You think back, and I was just recalling a few minutes ago how 30 years ago I'd go out to an agriculture meeting, and all the way there, driving all that distance, I was trying to think of something, some shred of hope that I could share with folks, because it was such a terrible time back in the late 70s and early 80s as we lost so many folks out of the agriculture industry. That's not the problem today, is it?
No, sirree. You've always got a lot of good information, and it's always positive. Where do you see agriculture going, Max?
Well, the big thing that we're watching, of course, is global demand. You know, the Chinese demand is just remarkable. If they have a hiccup of some sort, you know, we may get the flu over here, but right now, the demand is continuing to be robust for everything. When you stop and think about it, they're buying fuel, they're buying rubber, they're buying coal, and yes, thankfully, they're buying our grain and our meat. China is the #2 destination for pork produced in the United States, right behind Mexico. They're a big buyer of beef and, of course, corn and soybeans in a big way. They want to eat better over there. I mean, that's the key. They want more protein in the diet, and we're stepping up to supply it to them. But that's been the big factor, is the global demand that we've seen. You know, back in the 70s and 80s, we talked about China and the fact that their population growth somewhere along the line would allow them to be a big dynamic market, and it's here at last.
Speaking of the market, do you think prices right now, with you being in the knowledge and traveling around the country, do you think our prices for farm products like soybeans and corn are going to be stabilized pretty much to where they are now?
I think we're going to continue to see volatility. I mean, that seems to be the hallmark of today's markets, whether you're talking about the commodity markets or Wall Street. Actually, we've been much more volatile than Wall Street. I think we're going to still see those spikes and those troughs, but over the long haul, that trend continues to be climbing simply because of demand. You know, that said, you can always have some kind of a problem somewhere. We've learned that abundantly. We have to watch so many factors in the world today. We have to keep our eye on so many balls out there and moving at one time. But that said, I think generally speaking, we're at a plateau, a higher level now that can be sustained, and that's because of that global demand. You know, key to a lot of this too, from the standpoint of the grain demand, is the biofuels market.
Yeah, that's a growing market right now, isn't it?
Well, it really is, and we took away some of the tax incentive at the end of 2011. That may have dampened the demand a little bit, but this is a global phenomenon. We have to remember that. We're not the only country in the world that is using ethanol or using biodiesel. All you have to do is look down to the southern hemisphere, where Brazil has been using alcohol in their vehicles for 25 or 30 years.
Right. So it's a growing demand all over the world.
It really is. Absolutely. We're exporting some ethanol now out of the United States down to South America. But hopefully we'll recognize that this needs to be a part of our energy policy in the United States. You know, when we see a spike up in the crude oil price and we're paying more at the gas pump, and we lost a microphone.
I think we lost one of them there.
We've got the important one, though. We've got the one from the radio station anyway. Right. I don't know, maybe I hit the switch. But anyway, when we're seeing the strong energy situation, that's when we start to think a little more about ethanol. Unfortunately, we have short memories.
Right, exactly. And of course, we don't like those fuel prices we're having right now, and there's a lot of things contributing to that. I guess Iran is the one that's giving us a problem on that.
You know, that comes right back again. You know, we come back to the situation we were talking about earlier for alternative, we used to call them alternative fuels. But if we can do anything, obviously, to use more of our crop, become more dependent on what we're producing here and less dependent on what is coming out of those nations that don't like us, then that's going to take us a little further down the road towards security in the United States. You know, in this global kind of situation, we're becoming more and more dependent upon other countries. And that's one important point that I make about our food supply. If we don't take care of our farmers, if we don't take care of our ag industry, we'll be like a nation such as Japan, so dependent upon imports, relying heavily upon imports from other countries. I don't think we can afford to be that way in the United States.
You traveling around as much as you do, I heard you talking earlier today about touring manufacturing plants of farm equipment, and we're seeing larger farm equipment. We're having to get bigger combines, bigger tractors, better ways of moving grain. What are you seeing out there in the market now?
I guess that's one thing I find encouraging about a good, strong ag economy, Bill, is the fact that these companies such as AGCO and Unverfrith and others in the industry are able to channel money into engineering. And that's bringing along the technology. It's bringing along smarter and smarter machines. It's allowing us to improve the efficiency and productivity of our farms. And that's one blessing of a good, robust ag economy. It helps engender additional engineering. It helps create jobs off the farm. You're building new structures on your farms. It's creating jobs in many of our communities, and we should never forget that.
They tell us that I was touring Monsanto's plant a few weeks ago up in their headquarters in St. Louis, and they were talking about the doubled production of corn and soybeans and crop period over the next, well, like 2030, and their concern was how the farmer is going to be able to handle the grain to get it to market, from the field to the market, and the capacity of storage.
Well, you make a very good point. We are adding storage. We've added a significant amount of grain storage in the United States in just the past 2 or 3 years. You can see it when you're driving down the road. There are a lot of new shiny bins out there. That said, if we continue to grow the size of the crop as we need to, we're going to need, indeed, greater logistics, the ability to load out barges faster, the need to keep that river system in good shape. And I worry a little bit about this. I think we've lost sight of this. You know, most of us aren't really, if you stop to think about it, people in the cities, generally speaking, have no knowledge of what goes on in the river system. They don't care. They would care significantly if they couldn't get some of the commodities that are moving on the waterway. But that's an Achilles heel for us. I really believe it is. If we don't take care of the navigable waterway system, you know, whether it's the Missouri or the Illinois or the Mississippi, if we don't maintain those locks that are now, what, 70 or 80 years old, we could really be in trouble if those lock facilities all of a sudden start to go down on us. So, yeah, the logistics are important in our ability to continue to move grain to the world. There's no doubt about it. And you think about the projected population growth. You know, every second, 5 people are born in the world. And every second, 2 people die, so the net gain every second is 3 people. In a minute, you've added 180 people to the population of the world. In an hour, you've added not quite, but close to 10,000. At the end of the day, you've increased the population by about 250,000.
Man.
In a month's time, you've increased the population of the world. Think about this a little bit. In 1 month, you've increased it by 7 million people, or roughly the population of the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area added in the world every month. So then out over the course of a year, you've increased the population not quite, in the neighborhood of 90 million people. And that is expected to continue. That growth rate will slow as you get out there a ways, but the some 7 billion people we have in the world today, 7 billion, we just passed over that milestone at the end of 2011, is expected to grow to 9 billion by the year 2050. That's a lot more mouths that have to be fed, a lot more bellies that have to be satisfied. It speaks to the robust demand that it will be required. Now, hopefully, there won't be something that will hamstring us and keep us from meeting that demand.
Right. Max, let's talk about the livestock industry just a minute. Where do you see cattle and hog and poultry situations going to?
Well, it depends on which way you want to approach it. Certainly the demand is going to be still very, very good, Bill. I mean, you talk about the pork demand and the beef demand globally, and poultry is springing back. They're getting their numbers a little more in line right now. We're shipping a lot overseas, and that's a big part of the story. You know, with this situation of the drought in the southern plains, we've certainly done some irreparable damage to the cattle industry in terms of numbers. It's going to take a while to build that back. You've seen their commercials on television. Yeah. I mean, they tear your heart out.
Makes you want to cry.
It makes you want to cry. You see the cute little puppy and the kitty cat, and then you realize after all is said and done that a lot of the money, those checks that are being sent in to HSUS, the Humane Society of the United States, aren't getting back to local animal shelters. That money is being spent to lobby Congress. That money is being spent to pay big salaries. That money is being spent to continue to foster the big programs of the Humane Society of the United States. If they can't keep you ginned up, if they can't keep you all worked up and excited about that cute little puppy on TV, they don't get your money. They can't continue to expand their programs. And I shared with our radio audience just about 3 weeks ago a letter from a local Humane Society director in Minnesota. I think she was in Albert Lea, Minnesota. And she said, I must tell you that the concern at these local shelters is real. We have animals we're trying to take care of. It's an expanding need in this kind of economy. She said it's a growing challenge, but she said, I must tell you, we get no money from the Humane Society of the United States. So if you're going to contribute, she said, to the welfare of animals, do it locally. And
I heard that broadcast. I heard you with that.
I think it is such sound and powerful advice from a lady who was right there on the front line trying to care for local animals. You know, I don't worry so much about PETA. You know, PETA's been around a long time, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They're so out there. They do so much really stupid stuff. I think people are reluctant to write them checks. HSUS is the scary one. They're out there under the radar screen. They're very effectively working in state legislatures and also in the halls of Congress. They're the ones we have to be concerned about. Guiding agriculture policy to the point where it hurts the productivity of our poultry and beef and dairy and swine operations.
Right. We defeated them in this last time around here in Missouri, but we're not through with them. I'll be having some people on the radio station talking about that because it's going to raise its ugly head up again, and it'll continue on because, like you say, the funding that I catch myself wanting to send that $19 before I realized what was going on. And I didn't really have the $19, but I felt sorry for those poor little pitiful animals you were talking about there.
No, you're exactly right. We have to get that word out there to folks that this is a group that really isn't operating in the best interest of society or the best interest of the American consumer.
We talked earlier today on the radio about there's a bill, and I don't know if it's passed or not. You'll know this, but you've talked on this situation too, or subject on the radio, about children, youngsters, young people working on farms. There's a bill that's either passed, has it been passed, or it's been introduced?
Well, they proposed regulations.
Tell them about that.
Through the regulatory process, they would limit our ability to use young people to work on farms in the United States. And you stop and think about that, you know, most of us, I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you grew up working on the farm? You know, where you learned the work ethic, where you learned the skills, where you've learned so many of the principles that you've taken with you all through life. And my goodness, you know, this drive to limit our ability to have young people work out there is maybe one of the most concerning things because it could affect 4-H programs, it could affect FFA. You know, they're doing this under the premise of we're endangering young people on farms. And it sadly, simply because the agriculture workplace is where we live, we have had accidents involving young people. But we've made tremendous strides. That group that I was talking about with you on the air earlier, Bill, the Farm Safety for Just Kids has done a tremendous job in educating the public and educating young people as they grow up about the dangers that are naturally there because of growing up on a farm. I don't know, I don't think you're going to be able to eliminate that danger because it's right there in the workplace.
Right.
Many of our machines are violent by their nature. They're meant to chop, they are meant to cut, they are meant to, you know, process the crop. Well, you'll never be able to change that. But I think we have changed the mindset a little bit through the years, through the work of Marilyn Adams at that group, Farm Safety for Just Kids.
Right. And of course, the industry, farm machinery industry, has gotten more safety-minded and put more safety aspects. Sometimes, you know, some of this equipment. There's so many safety things on it, you can't run it.
Well, take a look at the operating manual today. You know, what, the first 83 pages, of course, are warnings and safety advisories. But you make an excellent point. These machines are far more safer than they once were, and that goes into the cost of the unit, of course.
Well, I've asked you a lot of questions. I guess I need to let you do a speech.
I thought we just did here. No, I tell you what, it's a pleasure to discuss these things with you, and there aren't too many other things that I wanted to say, but I want to come back to the youth thing for just a moment, because I think that's so important, Bill. Many of us here, we look back over our careers and our lives, and we think about somebody who might have reached out and helped us along the way, somebody who might have mentored to us and made a difference, some old guy, we think about him now, some old guy in the community who maybe helped us somehow. And now many of us are in that situation where you stop and think about it, we ought to be trying to do the same thing. And I guess I always raise that question with folks, is there something that you can be doing? Is there some way that maybe you can get a little more involved in the FFA chapter? You know, FFA advisors, they have one of the toughest jobs on planet Earth. They're putting in long hours. The pay isn't nearly what it ought to be. They're doing a tremendous job in the community helping with young people, but they sure need help.
Right.
And maybe there's something you could do to help with a scholarship in some small, quiet way. Maybe there's a way that ag advisor could get a helping hand from you. But I think it's one of the most important things we can do to be giving back a little bit and to help that next generation come along, because it's a challenge. We've got more and more young people who obviously realize now that they can make a living in agriculture and they want to come back. But as you know, getting that start is tough.
It's pretty tough, and there's got to be a start somewhere, and that's where people like us can make that start and make things happen.
I really think so, and I'm always encouraged when I see an older couple maybe, and they don't have anybody in the lineage coming along to carry on the operation, and they can find a young person and kind of mentor that young person and bring them along, and maybe there's a financing relationship that takes place there to help get that start. There are creative ways that are being exercised all across the country to help bring that next generation along, and I hope we can see more of that happening.
Absolutely, because they're the ones that we're going to be looking for as leaders of tomorrow in agriculture and both the political world as well.
Well, and you took me right to the final topic I guess I think we need to address from the standpoint of what should you be doing on all of these key issues, whether it's animal rights or whether it's property rights, the environmental regulation, the proposed labor regulations that could affect our young people working on farms. Can you be doing something in that regard? Have you been communicating with your lawmaker? When was the last time, ask yourself, when was the last time you took the time to write a letter or to go up to him or her when they were in the district and said, you know what, this is important to me, this matters to me. If you don't do that, if you don't take the time to, whether it's send an email or sit down and write a letter, or go up to them when they're in the district, shake their hand and say, you know, I voted for you last time. I'll have the opportunity to vote for you again, but you need to know this really matters to me. It matters to my neighbors. We need you supporting us on this issue. You know, if you're not doing that, who they're hearing from? HSUS.
That's it.
PETA.
That's it.
Greenpeace. Every one of those groups working against you, oh, you better believe it, they're hearing from them. And so it's so crucial, so important for you to have your voice heard. You may say, you know, I don't matter. I'm just a little cog out here. When I go to vote, you know, it gets lost in the shuffle. My vote isn't important. I tell you what, you can still make a difference, because so many times, Bill, I've been out to Washington, out to Capitol Hill, and the lawmakers will say, we don't hear from folks. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't get letters. And when you do write a well-documented letter, when you give them an example of something that affects you and your business, and you lay out the economics, you say, you know what, this new regulation cost me $500 more per month in my business. It cost me more time to comply. I had to hire a guy to handle my compliance. That's happening in some of our animal agriculture enterprises. When you lay that out for them and give them an example that they can use in a hearing room, you've gone a long ways toward helping yourself. I just think it's so important.
Yeah, you give them some ammunition to work with.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things that I certainly encourage Joanne Emerson and all of our Congress people and our political leaders in our state write them a letter. And when you see them out making a speech like Mike's and I are up here, go up and grab them. We can't do anything about the political world, but we do have some loud mouths that we can talk to places like this. So you can do the same thing, because your vote is just as important as anyone's vote, and they're going to listen to you.
You're exactly right. The other thing that comes to mind, and it's distasteful, I think, for me when I talk about it, but the reality today is that political action committees, the PAC way of doing business in government, is the way of doing business. You know, these animal rights activists and others have their own political action committees. They write checks to help foster the campaigns of people in Washington. And it allows them to be at the table and to have their voices heard. And that's why I say it's important for us to have our own political action committees in the agriculture community.
Absolutely. So remember that. When you see one of them out, you're going to be seeing them around pretty soon, if you haven't already, maybe some today even. Hit them up about if they're running for election, ask them where they stand on certain issues.
But when you've got that local approach, when you've got folks like John and his staff who go that extra mile to keep you running at planting time, or something breaks and they're out there hustling to try to get you going again, that means a lot, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And talking about the Heuer family, they have done an excellent job, and they keep growing and moving forward. And they've got such a great staff here too that is ready to assist you, the service department. They go beyond the call of duty to take care of you, and that's what a family and a community organization such as this place is all about. And I know exactly where you're coming from on that.
The only other thing I'll add, and then I'm going to wrap it up here. I've said that about 3 times, haven't I? The only other thing I'm going to add.
I told you to not let me stay up here.
I took control of the microphones. That's the bad thing. You let the mic get out of your hand here, Bill. I think, you know, we'll always have some challenging times in agriculture. There's always going to be something. You stop to think about it. Isn't there always something? Whether, you know, things are just purring right along and going just fine, and maybe there's all of a sudden a health challenge or some kind of an economic challenge, or just a challenge in the family you didn't anticipate. This time of the year, I think about a quote from John Wooden. How many of you are basketball fans? Don't you get a little bit excited during March Madness? Yeah. John Wooden, some of you may know, was the legendary coach at UCLA back in the 60s and into the 70s. I mean, legendary. They honor him every year at tournament time, you know, even though he passed away a couple of summers ago. And he coached out there. I think he had 11 national championship teams, and weren't 7 or 8 of them consecutive? Eight of them were consecutive national championship teams. Have you read one of John's books? I see you nodding there that you know who I'm talking about. John Wooden didn't just coach basketball, he coached young men. He coached them about life. He coached them during a very, very difficult time in the nation's history, during the Vietnam War. You know, every kid wanted to have hair down past his shoulders and wanted to wear the tie-dye jeans, and a lot of these kids were from tough urban communities, and John Wooden was taking them out onto the basketball court, and he explained to them that they would have their hair cut, that they would come into the gym wearing ties and sport coats. They would play as a team. They might have been strong individual players, but they would be playing as a team. And he taught them a lot about life. He taught them about faith, so much so that long after he had quit coaching, living in that Los Angeles area, these men who became giants in more ways than one would come back to join John, to join him for breakfast or go to a prayer breakfast with him. He had such a substantial impact on their lives. One of the things that was in one of his books, and I would invite you to pick up one of his books and read it. John Wooden, W-O-O-D-E-N, grew up on a farm in Indiana. He was the son of an Indiana farmer, but a legendary coach who touched so many lives. One of his sayings was, things turn out the best for those who make the best of the way things turn out. Now, it may seem like it's one of those throwaway coaching phrases, but think about that just a little bit. You know, everything's going along just fine, and all of a sudden you hit one of those speed bumps and you think, oh boy, how am I going to handle this? And really, when you think about it, John's advice is pretty doggone good, because things really do turn out the best for those who make the best of the way things turn out. I believe that, don't you, Bill?
I believe that. I believe that. I sure do.
You rascal, we better get off here before they put the hook on us.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Armstrong. Give him a great big round of applause.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it, sir.
Such an asset.
Thank you.